beginning in 1965, the military and paramilitary slaughtered up to 1 million Indonesians after overthrowing the government. That military was backed by the United States and led by General Suharto, who would rule Indonesia for decades. There's been no Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As the film says, Indonesia is a country where the killers are to this day celebrated as heroes. A key figure in the film is Anwar Kanggo, who killed hundreds, if not 1,000 people with his own hands and is now revered as a founding father of an active right-wing paramilitary organization. Well, director Joshua Oppenheimer spent more than 8 years interviewing the Indonesian death squad leaders. And in the act of killing, he works with them to reenact the real-life killings in the style of American movies the men love to watch. This includes classic Hollywood gangster movies and lavish musical numbers. The film is remarkable. Now, the issue of the Indonesian military's brutality is no stranger to our Democracy Now! Audience. In 1990 and 91, I traveled to Indonesian-occupied East Timor. I went there with reporter Alan Nairn. There, we witnessed a massacre by the U.S.-backed Indonesian military. That was the Indonesian military occupying a foreign land. This film deals with the Indonesian military's murder of its own people.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We are broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist, Johnny Cash aficionado, David Griscom.
How's it going?
How's my pronunciation going, by the way?
It's great. You got it down.
I got it down. Beautiful. On this week's program, Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor. She's a professor at Princeton University, author of From Black Lives to Black Liberation. We're talking about the Bernie Sanders campaign, the false choice between revolution and reform, and where are we in that continuum from lives to liberation. Looking forward very much to speaking with her. Then, Napoleon the Legend joins us. He's a really, really good rapper. What else could I say? And he's going to be talking about post-colonial Africa, his music, Sway. He's going to drop some information on Sway. No, I'm just kidding. Nothing but positivity with Sway. He's potentially a mutual friend. I don't know Sway yet. Maybe I will. Then Bhaskar Sunkara joins us, the founder of the Jacobin magazine. We're going to be talking about the problem with the coalition that Elizabeth Warren is assembling, why it is not the right coalition to either beat Trump or build for socialism in the long term. We've got a Christopher Hitchens throwback. In the postgame, we're reflecting on the legacy of Robert Mugabe. There's been a mass outbreak of xenophobic violence in South Africa. What does that say about the history of the African National Congress post-liberation? And Thabo Mbeki's abhorrent comments on violence against Nigerians. Lula gave an interview with the BBC, even as, and I can't not keep reporting these things, because if you remember, there was a phone conversation that was illegally leaked in 2016 that made it look like Lula was going to take the job of Dilma Rousseff's chief of staff so he could have immunity from persecution. Well, everybody always knew that phone conversation was illegally leaked and tapped, but now it's been proven that it was edited, and that most of the conversation Lula was actually saying, it's probably not a good idea that I do this. But there's a political calculation. That is never-endingly unbelievable, and how that relates to building the BRICS as an alternative power source. Plus, of course, we have a debunk and a bad. Dave Rubin and Tulsi Gabbard, turn off your message. Turn off your mentions. I don't care. But don't harass my rapper friend with your nonsense about Tulsi Gabbard. Or Bhaskar. He's not on YouTube either. These are normal human beings. You leave them alone. All that and much, much more on the Michael Brooks Show this week. But first, we have to talk about what's happening in West Papua. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
Papua.
West Papua. So West Papua is a...
Papua.
Papua. I think we're going to just have to go with the mispronunciation on this one. Is a province in Indonesia that is primarily made up of minority population and has long been a site of gold mining and natural resource extraction in the country. And it's also been a place that is, in this we see analogies to Tibet, we see analogies to Kashmir, we see analogies even to Puerto Rico. It's getting also, I guess, gentrified would be one way of saying it. A lot of native people are being displaced, and the Indonesian military, which has a extremely bad human rights record, and there has never been any process of sort of reform of the paramilitaries, disbanding of paramilitaries, or change in the Indonesian military after the decades of Suharto dictatorship. Suharto ran Indonesia from the 1960s to 1997, and there's been no kind of fundamental structural reform, and now things are really heating up in West Papua. How was that, David?
Papua.
West Papua. Guys, this isn't funny. This is really serious. I mean, my pronunciation is funny, but now we have to get to the serious part. The Indonesian government has sent over 1,000 security forces that are to the additional ones already occupying there. They have shut down internet access, though they have restored it in the province. This was all set off by mass protests, which responded to a video surfacing of security forces calling local students and residents dogs, monkeys, and pigs. There's also additional charges that a bag of poisonous snakes was thrown into a dormitory by nationalist militias yesterday. Police-backed armed militias on Sunday attacked a group of students. One student was killed from a bullet wound to the chest. And Indonesia has now called the arrest of human rights lawyer Veronica Coleman for incitement, unrest, and spreading fake news during the internet and journalistic blackout. She has been one of the few sources of reliable information on this situation internationally. The occupation of West Papua goes back a long time. It was a former Dutch colony. In the 1960s, it was taken over by Indonesia in what can only be called a land grab. There was a referendum on whether or not West Papua would join Indonesia in 1969 called the Act of Free Choice. Out of a population of 800,000, a small group of 1,022 hand-picked voters were selected to vote under military supervision. And I think we all know what the result of this sham election not only went the way of the Indonesian government, but was in fact unanimous. Now the region has the highest levels of illiteracy and HIV in the country. Indonesia has been pursuing mass migration to the area since the 1970s, and the ethnic makeup of the region has changed dramatically. In the 1970s, indigenous Malaysian Christians were 96% of the population. Today, they are a minority of 48%. The region is also home to plentiful natural resources, notably gold, which is controlled by the American corporation Freeport. Not only do they plunge the mineral wealth of the region, but they have destroyed the local environment and have dumped mining waste into the water supply, jeopardizing, of course, the entire health and well-being of the region. Indonesia was long ruled by a military dictatorship, gained power in the 60s, and was responsible for killing an estimated between 500 and 1 million communists and suspected leftists with U.S. backing. That's the documentary. The Act of Killing reenacts these paramilitary fighters, showing you how they strangled people, how you burn a village, how you ethnically cleanse a town. This was policy that was supported directly by the United States, sometimes actually through active participation in terms of providing information on target lists and other aspects of the killing. Suharto's regime was populated with economic advisors educated in the United States, dubbed the Berkeley Mafia. He allowed American mining interests, specifically Freeport Corporation, into the country. Freeport is the largest stockholder of the Grasberg mine, which is the largest gold mine and the second largest copper mine in the world. And the Grasberg mine is located in West Papua. In 2014, Joko Widodo, the first president of Indonesia, not from the military and elite family, but the military was elected. But the military still wields tremendous power in the country, highlighted by the selection of Wiranto to become the chief minister of the province in 2016. This is somebody with extensive military experience and multiple charges of human rights violations. And he was found responsible by the UN for crimes against humanity in East Timor. What's happening in West Papua could be called a slow-motion genocide, and it will continue if there's no active pressure from the global and international community in support of this struggle. It also mirrors everything from what's happening in Hawaii with the telescope, the Amazon, and really this notion that understanding, supporting local and indigenous communities is inseparable from a global environmental strategy. So we wanted to highlight that today. It's not getting very much coverage, but we will continue to do it as best we can, and also usually as a door to maybe get into more content about Indonesia. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add? I know Matt wanted to defend the military in Indonesia a bit. If you wanted to add anything, let me know, guys.
I just wanted to add that what's going on right now obviously is horrific, but it's an important example too of how divided oftentimes these governments are and how it's not always useful to try to paint in broad brushes. The new president of Indonesia has sort of been letting this happen, but you see with the reintroduction of the military powers into the region, especially with the selection of the new chief security minister, who had already been, convicted of war crimes, you see that he's having to placate something which is absolutely horrific. And the fact that even though he came from a different party and a different political tradition than the former governing organizations, the fact that just winning an election all on its own is not enough to completely transform a country is definitely highlighted here.
And he's in real danger. And he does represent something different. He's challenging some incumbent interests potentially, and he could be taken out.
Exactly. And and also again, just highlighting what's going on in the region too is definitely tied to the fact that there is incredible mineral resources, and the fact that those are not only being extracted, they're being extracted by an American company and an American corporation. It's something that we should also highlight, that oftentimes these kind of genocides and evils are not always just people being bad or having bad personal beliefs. Oftentimes there's a real financial incentive to trying to clear out human beings, and it's definitely why it's very important to be an anti-capitalist and an internationalist.
Let's get to the shout out. Do we have a shout out song?
I'm looking for a remix. And now the shout out.
I think I want to try the DJ Banner.
Shout out.
The hell of ideas return to loafers. It's quickly moving into the hot position.
I can never believe
shout out.
when I hear Dave Rubin drops that these are things that somebody actually
shout out.
Geopolitical politics.
Competition would start kicking in.
Shout out.
I'm not funded by the Koch
like
brothers.
seriously, honestly,
Some
like
research for yourself.
it's a psychedelic experience for a moron. My brain is in recovery mode. I'm taking on so many high-level important ideas. Like, the dial of ideas has quickly been pushed to the high position. As we touched on last week, more in depth in the post-game, but I want to shout out Uruguay's broad coalition government. This is a center-left government that has been running Uruguay in one form or another for 15 years. And they've cut social, they've made real strides in economic inequality in cutting it. They've been a leader in LGBTQ area, and they've also been really aggressive on environmental policies, right? And there's 3 key elections in Latin America right now, and getting out from under, this U.S. Bolsonaro far-right corporate trends. There's an election in Argentina. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. We'll continue to talk about that. Evo Morales is almost certainly going to hold on to power in Bolivia. We'll talk more about that. And then there's Uruguay. And I just want to quote really briefly. We have a friend of the show, Sam Goodman, who wrote this piece called Uruguay's Next President Inherits a Robust Climate Agenda, where he talks about basically like what's in play in this election, but also talks specifically about the ecological vulnerability of Uruguay relative to its footprint, which is, of course, typical of the global pattern here. Countries that face the most powerful impact of climate are usually the ones that play the smallest role in generating the crisis and the problem. In 2017, I'm quoting now, Uruguay placed a 4-year moratorium on fracking with unanimous approval. Uruguay has been a leader at international forums on controlling greenhouse gas emissions. They've rapidly invested in wind, solar, and biomass, as well as ecological protection. Another part of this tradition in Uruguay, he's not on the ballot this time, is an interesting leader named Jose Mojica, who really is another part of this wave of pretty incredible leaders that led during the pink tide. He's known as the poorest president in the world because he lives like on a farm, basically in the middle of the country. He got famous for legalizing marijuana, and a Vice interview where some like Vice idiot was like, "Can I smoke weed in front of you, Mr. President?" And he was just like, "Yeah, sure, it's cool. I'm going to smoke a cigar that Castro gave me," which was pretty funny to watch. This is a brief interview with him from several years ago with actually with Chinese television, Chinese American television, talking about what his government did on income inequality.
En este continente, que es el más injusto que hay.
On this continent, the most unfair on the planet, Uruguay is the country that best distributes its wealth. That is an achievement. What isn't an achievement is, given the dimension of Uruguay and the resources we have, that we still have people living in poverty, and some in absolute poverty. This means we have to carry on fighting.
Jose Mojica's government oversaw a major reduction in poverty in Uruguay at a time when the economy expanded. He considers improving the nation's energy provision as one of his major achievements.
We increased social spending enormously, but it was possible because the economy improved. We had a fiscal policy that was based on this policy. Those who have more are those who pay more.
Yeah, that's good. I just like, it's like, yeah, those who have more, those who pay more. It's really not that fucking complicated. So shout out to the Broad Coalition. That's a really, really important race to keep an eye on, and something that since 2004, they've made significant accomplishments. All right, let's talk about why it's time to become a patron. But first, come see us in Philly. Guys, how good was Chicago?
I had a very good time at Chicago.
Yes, you did.
Shout out.
That I totally will vouch for.
Yeah. You know who
I'm in a different mode. Man, at these shows, I don't even have a drink anymore. I just want to say I'm not being rude to anybody when I turn down a drink. I have to drink water. I have to stay on top of it.
We have to be able to talk to a lot of people.
I have to talk to a lot of people. I'm happy to talk to everybody, but it's, yeah. Although I will say, I like how like New York is like, "Hey, can I get a picture with you? And will you answer a question about MMT now?" And LA is like, "Hey man, you want to take a Molly with me? I love Right Wing Mandela." And Chicago is like, "Well, just thank you for coming here, man." And now it's time to go to Philadelphia. We love meeting all of you. We have so much fun. Just to be clear, this is November 23rd. This is the week before Thanksgiving. No scheduling problems. It's okay. We start putting this information out, and people just come with a wave like, I want to, but it's Thanksgiving. It's not Thanksgiving. It's cool. It's all good.
It really looks like Thanksgiving.
It does.
I think of Thanksgiving as the 27th. Isn't Thanksgiving always the 27th?
No, it shifts around.
Oh, what do I know? You know, I'm not
pagan
part
holiday.
of this. It's an insult to the Jewish Judeo-Christian tradition.
That was like Ben Shapiro meets Meghan McCain.
Yeah, I don't really care. Like, dad did our own Thanksgiving. Like, whatever. We made our own schedule.
We need Thanksgiving on Veterans Day.
We need Thanksgiving. Maybe because then we could thanks for what they give. I'm sorry. It just really makes me mad. Oh, I can't wait to talk about her and the goddess Pamela Anderson later. Has a childhood crush ever been more vindicated? No. She's on point. Come see us November 23rd with special guests Crystal Ball, Emma Vigeland, and Artesia Balthorpe. They have to update that. Everybody met Artesia last week. She is incredible. I always knew. We've been really good friends for a while. I knew that she would crush it. And it was just a question of when. And now people can't get enough of her. So you'll be certainly seeing her more on TMBS, and you will see her and meet her in Philadelphia along with, come on, Emma Vigeland and Crystal Ball. You know what it is. All of these shows have been great, and they're definitely getting refined so that by the time we go to Philly, it's just going to be in cruise control and everybody's going to have an incredible time. Also, for the last couple of ones, I know people have wanted to come. We made sure that this is for everybody. No age restriction. So for those of you who are not 21, get your tickets, get your, go. If you're in college, come see it. Or if you're a teenager, I guess take your folks along. But there's no age limits on this one. I'll tell, I'll try to keep the stage a little bit less vulgar. No, that's not going to happen. We're pretty reckless at these. Get your tickets. We'll see you November 23rd. So, and then, the pitch is really simple for Patreon. We're growing. We need to get to that 3,000 mark. That's our next clear goal. I think we can actually clear that in October. We could do that actually sooner if a lot of you who are watching. Now there's a huge amount of you downloading the podcast and watching on YouTube who should definitely think about joining the show because, number one, you get significantly extra content. So in the next couple of weeks, as an example, an illicit history of social democracy with Bhaskar Sunkara. This weekend, Bill Fletcher Jr. and I are going to do a deep dive on Mugabe. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be doing one on Tito, the non-aligned movement, and African liberation. The post games, I know some people probably think because we do clip some of them up for YouTube, we want people to get as much content as possible, but it's its own show. And sometimes we take calls, we take Discord questions. It's a whole other level of engagement and fun. And then most importantly, even just this main show alone takes a huge amount to put together and produce. And we just want to keep giving you the highest quality possible and growing what we do, which we've already done with those video illicit histories, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the post game as well. Join today, patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. We're going to take a brief break and we're going to come right back with Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor. She is author from Black Lives to Black Liberation and author of another book forthcoming. Keeanga, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and glad to be here.
So we want to get definitely to the books soon, and everybody should be reading your books as well as your column. I primarily read you in the Jacobin, but people can find your writing many different places. You've endorsed Bernie Sanders in a way that I think makes a lot of conversations that get very abstracted and kind of disconnected, I guess, both from like a sort of radical outside position of politics, if we're going to put it that way, and also from a sort of like programmatic, we're dealing in the kind of relative realities of where we are. These arguments get kind of mushed up, and I think it's kind of a false question of revolution or reform. And my read of your endorsement is that you're kind of calling into question that dichotomy too. Am I reading that right? And why have you endorsed Bernie Sanders so strongly?
Well, I don't think that you can get to one without the other, meaning that any discussion of revolution or a radical transformation, what Martin Luther King referred to or described as a radical reconstruction of American society, you can't do that without engaging in some process of reform, which is to say you can't go from the kind of ineptitude and corruption that our society is mired in today to a complete and total transformation with no reform efforts along the way. And so the way that I look at it is that reforms and reform struggle, and in some sense you could say every battle to make life better in our society today is a reform struggle, that those are necessary to deal with people's day-to-day lives, the issues that people confront on a daily basis, but it's also the process by which people learn how to struggle. This is the way that politics develops. This is the way that strategies and tactics and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, those all develop through the course of the struggle around reforms. And that's a process that can't go on into perpetuity. At some point, there has to be a break with what is existing or what is happening today. But even that, it's not an act of God. It's not an act of nature. It's a political intervention, a conclusion that people come to, namely through their struggles around reform issues, that there's something fundamentally broken in this society as it's currently constituted. I mean, in the 1930s and the 1960s, this is how reformists or liberals became radicals and revolutionaries, was the constant disappointing engagement with the political establishment and the status quo, and the ability to move 2 steps forward and move 2 steps back, and the frustration and realization that it wasn't enough, in fact, to struggle around reforms, that society, in the same way that King came to the conclusion that society had to be completely and fundamentally reorganized. And so I think that is a process that a certain section of our society is undergoing right now. I think that is part of what I would describe as a political radicalization or political awakening that has been happening in fits and starts in the United States, really since the fallout of the Obama candidacy in 2008 that gave way to Occupy, that eventually gave way to the development of the Black Lives Matter movement, that reflected the kinds of contradictions and tensions that appeared in the Arab Spring that was we saw some of in the Capitol battle in Madison, Wisconsin, and that ultimately has given rise to the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, first in 2016 and much more emphatically this time around. And so, I look at the Sanders campaign as really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in this country to have a self-described socialist, democratic socialist, socialist nonetheless, in the highest office in this country, giving voice to this demand that our government use its public money to do something more than cause war, mayhem, and destruction, that we use the public treasure to actually improve the lives of people in this country. I am under no illusion that a President Bernie Sanders can be elected on a Tuesday and show up, a couple of months later and just present the Congress with a list of demands. But I think that Sanders is aware of that as well, and that is what is at the heart of the discussion about the political revolution. It's the understanding that there has to be a grassroots component to his candidacy to make any of this real. And that, to me, is one of the key differences between the Sanders campaign and a Warren campaign. Elizabeth Warren says she has a plan for everything, but if you think that all you need is a plan and a well mapped out policy initiative to get anything passed in the horrible U.S. Congress, you're out of your mind. I mean, this is what the essence of 21st century class warfare looks like in the U.S. It looks like a Congress that has a Senate that is dominated by millionaires. The average wealth of a U.S. senator is $3 million. The average wealth of a member of the House of Representatives is something like $990,000. So we have a Congress made up of millionaires, and we have a billionaire president right now. So if you think that all you need is a plan to undo that kind of class privilege and the way that they wield it to their benefit and to the detriment to the rest of us, then you're not really paying attention to what is happening. And I think that Sanders' emphasis on the grassroots movement that is necessary to push through this agenda is, for me, it's the right understanding of how an electoral campaign can work together with tension and all of that, but can work together with a grassroots movement. But I do think that his campaign marks an important breakthrough for the sort of, the burgeoning socialist movement in this country, and that he's not only an expression of what I've described as a political radicalization, but he is also giving it a framework and language to understand why people are struggling to make ends meet, who the real enemy is, that it's not Black people, it's not immigrants, it's Amazon, it's Jeff Bezos, it's the people who are in charge of this economy. And I think, it's been, I just think the breakthrough that the Sanders campaign represents has really been understated by the mainstream media in the U.S., if not ignored. People just, they talk about Bernie Sanders as, some guy who just hasn't had the same message over and over again, as if the point is to be entertaining people and not talking to people.
There's not
about,
enough innovation. He hasn't updated it. You gotta. I have to say,
conversation.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I remember somebody kind of accosting me recently and trying to tell me that the problem with Bernie was that he didn't understand something called financial capitalism, which is apparently a new thing that has not existed before. And I was like, you mean that we have ATMs or derivatives trading now? And they were like, no, you don't. Yeah, you're stuck too. I was like, I am absolutely stuck because I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But do you think I think that's actually a really important kind of thing to spell out. There's, in the Democratic primary right now, the thing that's very easy, I think, to identify for a lot of people is what Joe Biden represents at the most just extreme on every level, which is just this decades of right-wing, corporate, third way, whatever you want to call it. Right. But then there's this for some people it's subtle, but it's actually like a significant chasm between a message that is saying the only way that this could even, first of all, that the only way that this could even have a prayer of working, something like delivering healthcare to every human being in this country, is with a absolutely radicalized and angry part of the population mobilized, versus I kind of get that this is really bad. It reminds me of the Financial Times pages, right? Like there's some people who are like, you know what? We are really hurting people so much that they're going to get a little bit angry. So we really should give them more, but without any of putting power into play. And it's liberal and progressive, but there's no power in play.
No, absolutely. I think in some ways it's, it's the difference between having an actual analysis of the problem along with a plan for how to confront it, whether or not the plan in the end works. It's just a different kind of conversation compared to what someone like Biden is selling, which is essentially, I'm electable. I think I can, I can beat Trump, and I don't have much to offer beyond that. And I think that his campaign has tried to hide him by not having him speak publicly, because I think that we've all seen that Joe Biden is probably his worst enemy. Every time he opens his mouth, his poll numbers begin to decline, and that at this point, what he's running on is name recognition. And I think that the polarization that has been created by the Trump administration has really foreclosed a lot of the space of the political center. It's not to say that the center is completely dead, but the kind of mealy-mouthed, soundbite political fluff, the typical third-grade discourse we're used to during election season, is not enough. People are actually looking for something to vote for, and not to just vote against. And I think that we saw that the kind of strategy of, America's already great, we just need to make it better, that was at the center of Hillary Clinton's campaign, is not enough. And the idea that it is to really miss the kind of suffering that is happening in this country that in some ways has been easily covered up by just looking at economic numbers. Oh, the growth is at 3%. What problems? We have no problems. Unemployment is at a historical low. We have no problems. And then it's ignoring other factors which have to do with the quality of life. Not that you are in abject poverty and homeless, even though we have a great lot of that, and numbers that appear to be going up around that. But what is the quality of your job? What is the quality of your health insurance, if you have health insurance at all? How much debt are you carrying with you? I mean, these are the deeper questions that lie beyond or beneath the kind of happy talk about the economy. And that is really part of what is driving this historical interest in socialism in the 21st century.
And I think that's such an important point to underline, because it actually gave, and this was I think that it's a little bit different this time, obviously, because Trump can't just sort of bloviate. He has his own record, and he obviously has done nothing to change any of these problems, although that means he will be even deeper on the xenophobia and
Right.
the racism. But I think that was so revealing in 2016, because there was this sort of fact check mindset that would say like, oh, well, what Trump said about the economy isn't true. Things are great. And I was like, well, no,
Right.
he's specifically going to places in the country where it's absolutely horrible. And you're completely divorced from that, even if you're sort of quantitatively correct in a way that has nothing to do with real people's
Yep.
lives.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there are some really shocking numbers that defy the bright spots of the so-called bright spots of the economy. One of the more shocking ones, like, Black people are 12% of the U.S. population, and yet Black people make up 40% of homeless people. That's one.
Already great.
I think, yeah, I know, exactly. I mean, to use that as a slogan in the midst of what at that point was the Black Lives Matter movement is absurd. I mean, the two make no sense together coming from a Democratic Party candidate. But even among ordinary white people, for working class white people, life expectancy has gone into reverse, meaning that working class white men and women are dying earlier than they were previously. And it should just be emphasized that this does not happen in the developed world. There are almost no examples in the developed world of life expectancy going into reverse outside of some kind of natural calamity. And yet that is exactly what is happening in the United States. And it's being fueled by opioid addiction, alcoholism, and suicide. And these are hardly the markers of a happy days are here again economy and society. And so I think that if we look beneath, we can see some of the factors that are driving the sense of cynicism about politics, which means that the typical sound bites don't work, that people are looking for substance, they're looking for an actual alternative. And it also explains the political search for an even broader explanation for why this is happening, and something that explains the mismatch between what we are told is the wonders of the market and the wonders of capitalism and what is actually happening in people's lives. Because if this stuff is happening now, when things are supposed to be great, when there's economic growth, when there's historically low unemployment, well, then what the hell happens when the bottom falls out? And we have spent the last 20 years destroying any semblance of an economic safety net in a country that has already had a notoriously anemic social welfare state. What on earth will happen then? And regular people think about this all the time because they are living from paycheck to paycheck. So even though these people don't show up in the statistics of, abject poverty, homelessness, they don't show up there, but they know that they're one or two paychecks away from there.
Right. But just two more questions for you. We'll shift in a minute, but I want to ask, you identified the distinct importance of Sanders talking about Martin Luther King Jr. And there's the one, look, some people have tried to undermine, he did march and he did do work and, good for him. That should not be negated as a point. But you actually made a deeper point about a really powerful philosophical tradition that he's tapping into when he does this, which has also been, whitewashed in American history and politics.
Well, I think that part of what Sanders is doing when he calls upon the legacy of King this is the proper invocation of King. It's not this kind of sanitized cartoon of Martin Luther King that gets wheeled out every January on the holiday that commemorates his memory. But it's really coming out of an organizing tradition. It's coming out of a political tradition that understands that the mechanism that we have to employ to change the dynamics in this country is one of social movements and mass movements. And I think that is an important legacy that Sanders taps into. But it's also his social democratic tradition, which is King. I don't think he ever stated it forthrightly before his assassination, but there's no question that his Poor People's March and his sharpening economic critique, the deeper he gets into the 1960s, the further he begins to get from the Southern Civil Rights Movement into campaigns for racial and social justice in the North, the sharper his critique of capitalism and economic inequality and its connection to militarism, to materialism, to poverty and racism becomes even more distinct. And I think that those are political frameworks and observations that Sanders has given voice to, along with the much more general social democratic ethos, which is that was central to King's Poor People's Campaign, but just that we need to use the treasury of this country not to war on people, but to wage war on poverty, to wage war on inequality. And I think that Sanders has captured both of those dynamics, one of the social movement aspect of what is necessary to fuel that kind of demand, and also the social democratic demand that we use the power of the state not for evil, but for good in the lives of regular people.
I just, in the final couple of minutes, we're 5 years from Ferguson. You're author of From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation. What's your sort of broad sense of where we are now relative to that journey?
Well, I have a long, it's probably a 5,000-word piece coming out in Jacobin about 5 years since Ferguson. And it's a mixed picture, which I think is really the evolution of any social movement. I think that there is a reality that it had a devastating impact for Trump and the right to try to make Black Lives Matter the foil of their white nationalist movement, and then once in power, to harness that to the power of the state, so that the FBI, concocts some ridiculous designation of Black identity extremists to use as a pretext to further surveil, harass, and intimidate Black Lives Matter activists. And I think that put a lot of people in the crosshairs, literally, and it created an enormous amount of pressure and strain on activists within the movement. And so I think that has been one outcome. I think that there has been another outcome, which is undeniable, that all of the discussion that has been generated in the U.S. over the last couple of years that is broken out of its sort of isolated circles of discussion. So prison abolition, police abolition, the whole movement for reform of the criminal justice system, for bail reform, the decriminalization of marijuana, so on and so forth, that all of this reform discussion, as nascent as it is, it's still early, finds not its complete genesis, because these discussions have been happening for some time, but it took a mass movement to make them part of a much broader public discussion, which is difficult to imagine happening without the force of Black Lives Matter making it so. And so I think that is important. But I think also that the movement has shown the limits of reform struggles in the U.S., particularly around the issue of police brutality. If anything, I think that Black Lives Matter has shown how central police brutality is to the ruling class in the United States. That for all of the talk about budget deficits and cutting this and cutting that, we know that funding for police rarely, if ever, goes down. We know that brutal, violent policing is central to maintaining, quote unquote, law and order in a society that is quite disorderly when it comes to taking care of the needs of people. And so there are many, the tens of billions of dollars are being spent to settle cases of police murder, police brutality, police harassment, while simultaneously public schools are being shut down, public hospitals are being closed. And that, that's the price of doing business. And so Black Lives Matter has shown the resilience of police brutality. And I think it's also shown some of the problems with a particular kind of organizing that focuses on a direct action alone, but without any clear mechanisms to bring in the tens of thousands of people who are radicalized by a movement, but don't know how to participate further than showing up to a protest or demonstration. I think it's shown the desperate need for democracy in our movement and organizing spaces to figure out how to incorporate the voices of those who are not paid staffers, those who are not on an executive board, but those who are vested and interested in being part of a democratic mass movement. And so I would say that, it's a mixed bag 5 years later, while at the same time showing without any question that the need remains for not just the movement against police violence and abuse, but the need for a much broader movement against racism and inequality in the United States that can clearly make the connection between the attack on issues of race to the broader agenda of plunder and inequality at the core of the United States.
So, and yeah, so kind of like what Jay-Z's doing with the NFL, kind of, that's what you're talking about.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Shit show. I know.
it's just this.
I know.
And you also have another book forthcoming as well. I believe it's called For Profit, and
it's called Race for Profit.
Pardon me.
How banks and the real estate industry undermine Black home ownership.
Well, I really hope that you'll join us again soon to talk about that book and a lot more.
Absolutely.
I really, really appreciate your time. Honored to have you, Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
All right, folks. And seriously, read. You can read her work. A Jacobin, like regular columns. This is like incredible socialist strategic mind here, and she's super strategic. That's why I like her so much. I fetishize strategic thinking. All right, we got 2 brief segments that we have to get to, and then we're gonna have Napoleon the Legend and Bhaskar Sunkara. But first, we're gonna do the gem, and then I got to talk about John Bolton. But first, it's the gem. Perfect. With let me be like Trump. Let's talk about the gem tomorrow. Whether or not that continues, let's talk about it tomorrow. I'm just playing.
No, I know.
All right, go ahead.
So there are so many nonsense critiques and reasons that people in capitalist press try to use to explain why there's such a stark wealth divide in the world. One of my personal favorites was a few years ago in Forbes magazine. There was a cultural piece about why capitalism hasn't really been so successful at fighting poverty in the Middle East.
Right.
And it was because they say inshallah, which means God willing.
Oh,
so
and that contradicts that, like, no, you have to make it happen.
So there's too much uncertainty in the market for it to be a successful system.
Well, Tony Robbins was just in Dubai, so we should have that taken care of. We're good to go. Don't worry about it.
Well, obviously, no amount of cultural critique or manners or personality shifts are going to be what changes the world. And it's also not even the case of how Europe or the United States became such powerful forces. They took and plundered and they got their wealth. You have to have something to invest in capitalism. And they took their wealth from the rest of the world. Ernest Mandel, who is a great Marxist economist, was able to add up the value of all the gold and silver that was taken from Latin America up until 1660, the booty extracted from Indonesia by the Dutch East India Company from 1650 to 1780, the harvest reaped by French capital in the 18th century slave trade, the profits from slave labor in the British Antilles, and from a half century of British looting in India. The total exceeds the capital investment in all European industrial enterprises operated by steam in about 1800.
Inshallah.
Yeah, and that
ancient history.
It's ancient history.
By the way, that's from the book Open Veins of Latin America, which everyone should read.
Stay current.
No, but obviously you see that, the actual extraction of wealth from the rest of the world was key to the economic advantages that Europe enjoyed. And obviously in the United States, the slave trade, the amount of stolen wealth and labor from, African Americans drove American capitalism. And not only that, but also the use of slave labor, but also slaves themselves as collateral was a major factor in the American finance system that also flowed into European banks as well. So the point is that the capital that was used to create capitalism success in capitalism in Europe and in the United States was capital that was stolen from the rest of the world. And that's why when we talk about the rich and powerful in our society, we also need to recognize that that wealth was created from extraction and stealing from the rest of the world. But just because the colonial era is over doesn't mean that these systems aren't continuing. There was a really interesting report that came out from the Global Financial Integrity Group, which is a great think tank of a bunch of economists from all around the world, who found that since 1980, $13.4 trillion from developing countries have outflowed out of the developing countries and back into the United States and Europe. And that's primarily through capital flight and also through debt extraction. So these systems are still continuing today. And when we think about these sums, I mean, these are absolutely significant amount of money that have a huge impact on the ability of these countries to be able to invest in their own society and their infrastructure. And we talk about all the time when we're talking about left-wing governments coming into power, one of the first things that happens is a massive outflow of capital flight from these countries. So this is not just a question of doing the right thing. This is a real serious question about democracy, because we have such power and such resources that are being able to be extracted from communities whenever they implement their own democratic will, that in fact, punish countries. And we understand how debt is used by the United States and Europe to try to force countries to participate in an economic system, even if they don't want to participate in it, to force austerity on people. So when we're talking about trying to change this country, we very much need to be recognizing these institutions within the United States that play a major role in the extraction of wealth from the rest of the world. And any kind of socialist movement cannot just end at the United States border. We really need to recognize that as the imperial seat in the world, that we have a responsibility to try to dismantle these systems as much as we can if we are able to come into power. Obviously, it's something that's very difficult to talk about while we're still trying to fight our way in, but it's the kind of awareness that we need, and also the recognition that we need to be trying to forge these bonds with leftists around the world, because we really do need to have larger international organizations.
Lula Libre.
Yeah, seriously. And also, to start really thinking about being able to implement some form of capital controls, and also try and honor other countries' right to be able to make sure that their bourgeoisie is not able to just, pack up and move away anytime that a leftist government comes into power. Certainly, organizations like the IMF and the World Bank are major parts of this, and we need to end the kind of de facto rule of these organizations by the United States and Europe. These systems, the problems that we face really are international. We really need to be building an international community that's able to fight these, and we need to recognize upon what travesties that the wealth that the West enjoys comes from.
Absolutely. Pretend I'm Tulsi Gabbard for a second. I look at that as
Tulsi?
A soldier.
Yeah,
Think about that from the perspective of being a soldier. What are the objectives, Thomas? What are we trying to do? T tweeted out the other day. He tweeted one of the new Tulsi Gabbard workout videos, and he's like, "She's trying to thirst trap her way to the presidency,
absolutely.
and I'm here for it." and I agree. I agree with him. I am like there was plausible deniability with one of those videos, and now she's just like, hey, here's box jumps. It's like,
well,
all right.
She talked about it.
With, respect. What?
She talked about it with Dave Rubin at the end of the Rubin interview.
Why are you putting out these videos?
Well, and she frames it as, it's like, I just love getting all the comments like, you're my fitspiration. It's like, that's not what this is about. This isn't about fitness, Tulsi. Come on now. Yeah. Let's be real with the American people.
If I was extrapolating personality sets from Twitter behavior, I would guess it's not a lot of fitspiration.
I know a couple frat boys.
It's spiration. By spiration, I mean an inappropriate emoji.
The types of objective journalists that never criticize Tulsi on Twitter. Not
very
fit, folks.
Very objective.
Not
very fit. But that's the thing. It's like, it's the classic dynamic where, I mean, I like her better than her fan base, because I respect that. She's like, I look at what's the objective. I want people tweeting sweat emojis at me. All right. And we'll talk about the gem tomorrow. Let's loop back on that tomorrow. TMBS account, just like, we have been trying to save the gem for quite some time. There was a lot of pushback. Unfortunately, David had a lot of bad ideas.
I tried to resign the night before.
Yeah, he's like, no, I resigned. So this morning, Donald Trump put out a couple of tweets that were clearly not Donald Trump tweets, so we won't even quote them because they were boring and lucid and whatever. And the bottom line, it was a little catty because he was kind of like, John Bolton had a lot of ideas that a lot of people didn't like, or something to that effect. So he had a touch of the flavor, but basically it was a kind of boring, like, you're fired tweet. And the hysterical part is that John Bolton immediately rushed out on his Twitter account and said, I offered to resign last night, and President Trump said, let's talk about it tomorrow. Trump, and here's my thing. Like, I know that I have an unhealthy fandom of Donald Trump in some ways, but it's like, I think he did talk about it tomorrow. He literally talked about it with the world and said you weren't welcome back at the White House anymore. Like, I don't really know what John Bolton is whining about. And incidentally, he's supposed to be tough. Now, this is actually great news from the perspective of not having a war with Iran, from the perspective potentially even of ratcheting down regime change efforts in Venezuela, which Trump, by the way, a couple of months ago, the real tell was that Trump was at either a press conference or on a Fox interview. I think it was actually a Fox interview. And he just sort of, in the middle of talking about Venezuela, going through the motions, just started saying that Maduro was a tough cookie. And I think that was kind of like his signal that maybe Guaido's not a tough cookie. And he wants to be friends with the tough cookie.
So why does Guaido look like Obama?
Guaido looks like Obama, but he's not even as good. And Maduro's a tough cookie. That guy eats a lot of empanadas, and he still wears a tracksuit. But this is, I mean, and the substantive point is that Donald Trump has put the whole Middle East into even deeper disarray, and he tore up the Iran deal, and it's a catastrophe, and it's incredibly reckless. And the best case scenario, which is increasingly likely because Bolton's gone, is that we're just going to go back to some bastardized version of what was already agreed to. But the other two substantive points are all of the Republican. This is an area where all the Republican presidents would, in fact, be worse, almost certainly. And the third thing is David Frum, Rick Wilson, John Bolton. I remember Rachel Maddow doing a segment a couple of months ago where she was just like, setting everything aside, don't you feel bad for him? And my answer was no, but it remains to be seen what the answer of the MSNBC bookers are. All right, we're going to take a brief break, and we're going to have Napoleon the Legend for a minute, and then Bhaskar is going to join us, and it's going to be a whole scene, man. All right, we're going to take a little break. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now, it's an honor for me to do this, is my friend. What, is there a problem? All right. I'm going to do a long introduction because these gentlemen did not set his mic up. His name is Napoleon the Legend. He's a rapper. He's an activist. He's a political analyst. Is his mic ready? All right. Thanks for being here, man.
What's up, Mike? Honored to be here, man.
Hey, man, it's great to have you.
Yep.
We've been talking for a little while. This has been in the works.
For real.
So we were just playing Afro Street.
Yep.
How did you get into music?
Man, it was part of the household, man. You know what I mean? Like, I was born in Paris, France. Both of my parents are from the Comores Islands. And we moved to Washington, D.C., Maryland area when I was around 4 years old. So I was always listening to music in the house, whether it was African music, reggae, and then I discovered hip hop when I was here. So once I seen my friends do it, it was a natural thing for me to start doing it too.
How did you start thinking about politics in relation to your music, and how did that relate to where your family came from?
I think it was always in my consciousness, because coming from Comores Islands, Comores has been a country through a lot of turmoil. There's been like 20 coups d'etats through the history, which is probably one of the most in the world. So I was always getting news about what was going on over there, and then I was watching the TV and seeing what was going on here. Right. You know what I'm saying? With the Bushes, with everything that was going on, the Clintons. And it was it for me where I was like, when I used to go back to Comores Island, I saw the difference of the lifestyle. It's like true third world. So, you know, there's poverty and there's poverty.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, you could be sitting in a house and...
There's a map got up here.
Yeah, right there. It's between Tanzania and Madagascar. It's 4 islands. And it's, they were colonized originally by the Arabs, and there was like slavery over there too. And then the French came and colonized there afterwards. Mm-hmm. And what happened was in 1975, the French were nice enough to give us our independence back.
That's nice of them.
Right?
Right.
And but they played a little slick game with us because they voted.
That wasn't slick, Bhaskar.
Right.
See, we're talking about slick games. Bhaskar's over here kicking beer. So in 1975, the French, quote unquote, give independence. But what actually happened?
Well, there was a vote, and overwhelmingly, the Comorian people wanted to be sovereign over their own, you know, have agency over their own lives and their country. And retroactively, through some weird games, they said that the island of Mayotte voted to stay to Comores. So they arbitrarily said, we're going to separate them and we're going to keep that. So we're
going to keep Mayotte, the one island, we're going to keep as part of the Republic of France. Why do they want to keep that one island?
Well, the way that it's situated, it's in the Mozambique Channel, so there's a lot of commerce that goes up and down. Right. So it's strategic for France to have a presence there. So they wanted to keep their presence there. And Mayotte was something they didn't want to let go of. So basically, even though it's islands, people need to understand it's one people, it's same language, it's overwhelmingly Muslim because of the Arabs that came earlier. So it's not like each island is a little bit specific, but it's the same people. Or for me, my mother's from Mayotte, my father's from Anjouan, which are neighboring islands. So just so you see, there's some people in Mayotte that have family in Anjouan, vice versa. And they just separated it and they kept it. And it was a violation of international law and recognized by the UN. And still nothing is ever done because it's in a remote place where people don't really talk about it.
So it's literally still a colonial possession of France.
Well, now Mayotte is France. It's an official department of France.
Right. So that's the other part I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about the incredible poverty there.
Right.
What about Mayotte?
Well, Mayotte is doing better than them. You know, like there is still poverty in Mayotte. Don't get me wrong. And overwhelmingly, the old colonial, you know, there's a few families that have a lot of money there, and the white people in Swahili we call them the Mzungu. They own most of the stuff over there.
What's the Swahili word for white people?
Mzungu.
Oh, you're gonna have to. I'm gonna try to memorize that. I feel like that word could come in a lot of use.
You'll hear it. You go to Kenya or something like that. They're gonna say Mzungu. That's
yeah,
what it
to
is.
the other ones, they'll pull me aside.
Right, but they're
be
gonna
like,
they're
yeah.
gonna knock you down.
They'll be like, hey, look at that.
So
yeah.
basically, yeah, there's a lot going on, and what happened was also France. Even though they gave independence, they didn't really let go.
Right.
It was like was like the post-colonial, was this like neo-colonial times in Comoros, which caused all these coups d'états, because there was this mercenary called Bob Denard, French guy, right-wing type guy, very close with the South Africa, apartheid South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and he came in, he took one of the presidents out, put in another one.
What year is this?
That was right after the independence. Don't quote me on the actual years. Yeah, it was in the 70s. And so this president Ali Swali came in, and they deposed Ahmed Abdallah from Anjouan. And he was actually an interesting character. He was actually like a socialist. I wouldn't even say communist. He wanted to bring communism to Comoros. So he had a lot of good ideas, but it was very poorly executed. Mm-hmm. And he made it. I feel like he made, from what I've heard, he made a few mistakes. Like he brought down the voting age to 14 years old. Like the head of the army was 15. So
the head of the army was 15. I was about to say, you could actually persuade me on the voting age, but I think head of the army, that's a lot. That's a lot, yeah.
He did a few things that probably were ill-advised, and so there was a lot of violence that was happening and stuff like that. So Ahmed Abdallah, who already was deposed by this guy, Bob Denard, who's a mercenary from France. He called him, and so he helped him get back into power. And he killed the president. They shot him.
Right.
So he got back into power. But as you can see, that mercenary Bob Denard wanted to be kind of like the king of the island. That was like his little fetish, his fantasy.
Right.
He loved the island. It's a tropical island. It's beautiful. It's like going to like the Cayman Islands, or when I go to Jamaica, it's like the same thing. Palm trees, beaches, stuff like that. Beautiful people, nice people, nice weather. So he wanted to be the king of the island, so to speak. And even though officially France wasn't backing that, he would have to work with some of the secret services in France to know what was going on.
And that's how it always works.
Right.
You always with these paramilitary groups and private contractors. I mean, that's how so many things are done. What's the situation today?
Well, the situation today, before I get back to that, what was funny is that he helped the guy. He also ended up killing the guy he helped put back in power. So he killed two presidents. Like he was in a room and somebody got shot, and it ended up being the president and the bodyguard of the president. He says he didn't do it, but who knows? What's going on now? So it was an interesting story. The current president also did a coup d'etat in 1999. His name is Azali Assoumani, and took power, and he did something kind of like different from the rest of a lot of these African leaders that go into power that they never want to leave. He took the power. Then a few years later, he left. He wasn't elected, so he let somebody become president. He got elected again, and he got elected again recently. But what's been happening lately is that when he made a referendum on his constitution, so he changed the term limits so he could present himself again, and he could technically stay president until 2029, which is
that's not a bad term.
Some dictator type tendencies there.
That's a little tendency.
And
2029.
Right. That's some Trump. That's what I'm saying. Trump would get along with a lot of these African dictator types. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if he wasn't a total racist, but definitely there's some kinship. But I want to. All right. So what on the other track? Like, you're an independent artist, right? So, and let's play. What's the other track that we have? What's the name of the other track? The non-clean version we can't play too much of it because I don't want to demonetize our YouTube.
Well, we can play it.
No, of course we're going to play it.
It's a Soldier of Truth.
Soldier of Truth. Let's play some of that. And then talk about, your music, but also like where, like the business of how all this stuff works is so complicated now. Like, where are people finding it? I know you perform and tour a lot in Europe. People are seeing you in France and the Czech Republic. We'll get to that in a second, but first let's play.
Pop corks while I sound knock your socks off. Read the headline, 7 projects in a year. Y'all took black babies, I'm about to adopt Britney Spears, groundbreaker. Ill and out, scratch, I'll take her. With or without paper, you dudes is cloud chasers. On my clue tape, 90 shit, K-Slate, grimy shit. Almighty, woke up in it, all wanna bite me. Soon, yeah, school of Mecca, yeah, that type respect. Envelopes under the table just to duck the IRS. I invest in small business and call out bigots often. Try to comfort me, I show you how to get a coffin. Show you how to make a song of how to get him talking. That talk turn to money, show you how to get him walking. Now I got
who your flow does remind me of.
A little stressful. Man, cause you stuck from where that day.
Let me guess.
Take it.
Yeah, I guess.
Take the guess.
The GOAT? My personal GOAT?
Definitely. Yes.
Nas. Yeah, a lot of people say
it does
that.
remind me of Nas. It really does.
We had a YouTube commenter say, Michael, don't ask him about Nas.
Oh. Well, first of all, who's ever in charge of banning people, get to it. And secondly, I was just going to make a passing observation, but being with that comment, you know, what do you think about Nas?
Nah, Nas is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
definitely top 3, hands down. Just poetic, just nice with it, you know, just insightful, just good music.
How does it work as a business now? Where do people find you? How do people connect with it now? And how does it exist? Like, there is some parallels, I guess, to all of this, right? Like, you're building direct relationship to an audience, you're performing live, all of this.
Well, you know, you figure it out as you go. You know, I've been able to be, like, you're online all the time, right? Unlike a lot of artists, not like very few, I'm very prolific. Like, last year, I put out 10 projects.
Wow.
This year, on Friday, I'm putting out an EP, King of the North Star. That's gonna be number 6.
Wow.
So I've been constantly, I'm inspired like that. I make music all the time. So I was able to put out enough content and just to create a buzz and let, you know, people start talking and sharing. And it garnered interest. When I put out Still This Mixtape project in 2016, I think that's when people really started noticing, because I put out a mixtape, people loved it. And then I put out part 2 like a few months later, and nobody expected it. And it was just as good or better than the first one. And I had a song called Black Privilege, where I did a video for.
Sway likes that.
Right. And it was on Video Music Box.
Yes.
Ralph McDaniel was playing it. And it allowed me to start going on real tours.
Right.
And from then on, I just kept going.
Where do you tour mostly?
Well, I've mostly in Europe. That they really have an appreciation for what I do over there. I've been in Europe twice this summer already. I did France, Switzerland.
That's what we're doing with the booking, man. Every other second, we're like, Kareem, can you come in? Oh, you're like, I'm in Europe.
Yo, I love Europe. You know what I mean? They really got love for what we're doing, and I'm doing a lot of shows too here. Like I did a whole bunch of Harlem Week shows.
Right.
I did at least 5 of them summer stages, shows in Newark. I went to Buffalo this summer. So it's really through word of mouth and people kind of reaching out, liking the music, fans hitting up promoters, stuff like that. So it's a grassroots thing. It's like just like Bernie is grassroots. The way I do my thing is grassroots because they relate to what I'm talking about in my message and what I stand for. I'm kind of like a little bit like the anti-rapper in a way, you know. I don't relate to a lot of the posturing and the stuff that's going on. Like we did that in the 90s, man. 90s was neoliberal. It was like a lot of fluff. It was a lot of that. We loved it. We had fun with it. But now it's like things are real, man. Trump is in power. The Amazon is burning. There's a lot of things going down. We can't just talk about one thing all the time.
Right.
So that's my whole thing. It's like things are real. I was informed through rap. I used to listen to like X-Clan. Sometimes I used to listen to the Wu-Tang Clan. They used to tell me things. I used to look them up.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I do fun rap too. I do Afrobeat too. But I like to talk about certain issues of the day.
Right. Oh,
in my
absolutely.
music.
Yeah. But in a way that is very, because I've actually mostly, like, I always used to joke, like, I would like people to like, hey, there's this really good political rapper. And I was like, look, I like rap that is about killing people, selling drugs, and objectifying women. I do not want to hear whatever, like, nice, conscious, whatever you're talking about. And that's mostly because a lot of that, though, is so self-consciously conscious.
Right.
That it just, it's just, to me, it's like art isn't necessarily the most fun vehicle for that. But that's not what you're doing at all. It just so happens to be like, that is what you read about. That is what you think about.
Right.
That is who you are. So it just comes across.
Yeah,
like,
it has
you
to
could
be-
describe it that way, but I feel like it's very natural. That's why it works so
It
well.
has to be flavorful and dope. It's not. I don't read a book and then write a rhyme.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm surprised at the things that come out sometimes, like the notions or the things that I'm dropping. It just comes naturally. It's in my psyche, so it just comes out in a rhyme. But it's not. I never force it. I'm not trying to tell you how to live and things like that. I'm just trying to be nice with it.
Although, when is the Lula song coming out?
Oh man! whenever I get my boy Rod Shallow to do something with me or something like that.
Are you serious?
I need.
If you could get
him.
him, by the way, that's a great reggae artist. If you could get him to do a Lula song, that would be nice.
I would need somebody of that caliber to really do it justice.
Yeah.
Need
Well,
some
let's get him.
melody
Let's
to
do it. He should come in studio too. Come on. We'll play F, Marry, Kill with him.
For sure.
All right. We're going to bring Bhaskar in a second, but you're with Bernie, right?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. That's literally what Bhaskar asked. That's his pre-question for everybody. He's like, I'm on with the Bernie guy, right? I say, of course. Right. Yeah. Let's actually. You want to just come? Yeah, come on. All right. We've got. Does Bhaskar set up with headphones? Because we are going to play some sound.
I think I'm good.
Are you good? Can you hear? Can you hear me through it? Okay, beautiful. All right, everybody knows the great Bhaskar Sunkara, founder of Jacobin Magazine, author of... Bhaskar, do you have a copy of your book that you want to hold up?
I have it in my bag. I was reading it myself.
Go grab it. Go grab it, man.
Oh, man.
Let's promote it. Be shameless. I've read enough V.S. Naipaul to know that you're ready to do this, man.
So I was not reading it to just feel myself. There's
The
a paperback coming
Socialist
out.
Manifesto, the case for radical politics in an era of extreme inequality, which I have to say is a book that I have actually read cover to cover.
Thanks.
And that is not something that's happening a lot these days. That's terrible. I wish I was doing a lot more, but I did.
I've listened
really
to
good
it
book.
cover to cover.
And Matt, of course, has given
Audible
it
version
the-
is good.
How was it? How was it?
It was good. Yeah, you read the intro, I think, right? Or do you read the whole thing?
No, I didn't.
No,
read
you
a
don't read
single
any
word.
You don't read any of it.
No,
Okay.
no, I didn't even know.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Someone owes me a royalty check. I don't think I've seen any of that audiobook money.
Really?
I don't know.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
probably
All right.
coming
All right.
years.
Well, we should end the show. You should go look into that, man. Wanted to talk a little bit about, this is the time where I think it is important to sharpen some of these contradictions, I think, frankly, between Sanders and Warren. And I always say that people should be relaxed about this because it's, she is absolutely a much better candidate than the obvious bad candidates. Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg or, to the extent we talk about a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris or a Pete Buttigieg or a Beto O'Rourke is purely predicated on this person might have some pull and some juice right now, and we need to be part of an onslaught to clarify who they are and what their record is. And Elizabeth Warren is not in that category. There's some people who really don't like, who want to polarize Elizabeth Warren in a way that is also not accurate to who she is and what she represents, so I won't do that. At the same time, and I'm sorry, that's actually really loud, she clearly represents something radically different than Bernie Sanders and not as ambitious, not as transformative, not, she wants to ameliorate the conditions inside the rule set of the conditions instead of changing the conditions. And, a lot of people are out now, I think, really, just as it would be wrong for us to say, oh, Elizabeth Warren is the same as Joe Biden, it's ridiculous to say, oh, she's just the more practical Bernie Sanders, or she represents the same thing and blah, blah, blah. This is just absolutely not true. And I think one of the ways I wanted you to speak to a little bit was part of what the evidence of that is the coalitions that they're amassing. Bernie Sanders is putting together a multiracial working class coalition, and the Warren coalition looks a lot like, and specifically, we were talking about this the other day, the Bill Bradley, Howard Dean coalitions. Overeducated, white, affluent. Why do you think that is? And what is the problem that poses moving forward?
Well, I think if you go back to 2000, sorry, this is a bit loud.
No, it's fine. We'll wait for. We're gonna play some sound in a bit. So
all right,
no worries.
So she became a Democrat in 1995, 1996. And
right in the middle of my heyday.
But she was like 40, 46. I don't know. She was in her 40s. Yeah. She was in her 40s when she did it. And part of her realization was how the rules were stacked against working class people.
Right.
And for her, this was kind of I thought the rules of the game were fair. The rules of the game are rigged. I need to make the rules fair. It's a vision that's fundamentally technocratic. And no doubt some of the things she's proposing will, in fact, help working class people. People are getting screwed on mortgages. They're getting screwed on payday loans. They're getting screwed by their insurance companies. Like, in fact, the rules are stacked against us. It requires way too much time to navigate stuff. You know, there's a million things. When I'm with my dad, right, who came to America in his early 40s and, you know, he's still with it, but not fully, you know, he's in his 70s now. Yeah. And, like, I'm with him at Avis, and you find a $20 overcharge and things like that, right? Like things that young people can navigate, that people with like more spare time can navigate. But a lot of working class people, busy between jobs or whatever, just know that they can't afford it anyway. So what's the difference between a $320 bill and a $300 bill if you can't pay it? So there are legitimate ways in which I think a Warren presidency could help, but it's a different vision of change than saying, you deserve to be angry. You know, you're getting further and further behind. The reason why you're getting further and further behind isn't because the rules are slanted or there's some regulations in place, because millionaires and billionaires keep benefiting from the situation you're in. And it's not rules. The game itself is flawed, and we need to be playing a different game. And we need to fight together, fight from below. It's not a big structural change in this kind of vague, technocratic way. It's you yourself bringing about this change. And I think the difference is that clear even at that level. And also, if you look at the policy, she's proposing more moderate things than Bernie Sanders.
Right. Absolutely.
She's already signaling that she's willing to take corporate money when it comes to the general election. And she's signaling to the elite that if ever you get nervous about Joe Biden, if this guy starts acting really old, even more erratic,
if he bleeds out of both eyes,
then I'm there as a fallback. I'm the new Kamala Harris fallback. He
talks about being in a bathhouse with Strom Thurmond and how Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in 1985, and people really need to just shut up because Obama was his friend. That maybe at that point it might be good to have a plan B.
Yeah, and Warren is there. She's ready to be the plan B. And also, here's the thing I'm really worried about. She might, this is me being complete over-the-top speculative fiction. I should not be saying this, but I can imagine a scenario where, let's say, Biden or Sanders, let's say, for the sake of discussion, Biden has the most delegates, but not a majority. Sanders is close behind him, number 2. Warren's kind of a distance behind them, number 3, in which it's brokered at the convention that she wins the top of the ticket. You know, I can imagine scenarios like that playing out, especially with these new DNC rules. She's positioning herself there. I think you don't have to make up lies about her. You don't have to say she's terrible.
Right.
But there is a better alternative on offer.
What do you make of this? Of course, and look at this profile of support thing. I mean, I really want to get into this because I think that, like, this is where it really underlines the concern in two senses. One is the type of actual systems change that only one candidate is putting on the table for actual redistribution and democracy, and that's Bernie Sanders, no matter how elegant and positive some of the technocratic changes are. And two, you know, let's talk about electability. I mean, what do you need to mobilize to defeat Donald Trump? That is not the map of, you know, we don't need to lock the gluten sensitivity vote to beat Donald Trump in a general election. So, like, talk to that part of it, too.
I think one thing that's interesting, if you ask anyone, even kind of a neoliberal Democrat.
And I'm part of the gluten sensitivity vote in some respects, so...
No, it's no joke. I used to make fun of it. Then I went to Ireland, and everything in Ireland's like cider, gluten-free or whatever. Then what's wrong with this place? And it's a gene.
You learn to not make fun of the Irish people about their gluten sensitivity.
A small percentage of white people suffer from this thing. Some others too. But I don't know. These people from Greece, they're just
Wait,
lying about it.
What's the Somali word again?
Mzungu.
Mzungu gluten.
Mzungu gene.
The Mzungu gene.
But everyone agrees that Bernie is the candidate who can best compete for Trump voters.
Definitely.
I think even a lot of mainstream Democrats will concede this about Bernie. He's also the candidate who's well positioned to do well, encouraging turnout among Black and Latino voters, particularly younger Black and Latino voters. So where's the trade-off? He's going to both win over some of those people who went from Obama to Trump, and he's going to encourage turnout because obviously a lot of Black and Latino voters are not going to go over to Trump, but they're just going to stay at home if they're not inspired by the candidate.
Go back again, as always, to a regular on this show, Malika Jabali's work in Wisconsin. It's the same point.
And the only thing Biden has going from to this point is the perception of electability, and that's already starting to pop.
Whoa. Like his eye at the forum.
You know, we tweeted something about that, and we got lots of angry.
Oh, whatever. As always, the principle still stands.
Shaming this poor man.
Shame your shame.
Yeah.
Please.
But, he does seem shaky.
Christ.
He seems shaky.
No, he legit. I mean, what do you think of watching Joe Biden from just a performance standpoint? It's kind of scary, right?
I mean, he's like on ice, you know what I mean? It's like it feels like he's improvising everything, like freestyling. Like, that's how I feel. Like, he comes with an answer, and he just trying to find the words. He's messing up his homie Obama's name. It just doesn't.
Barack, the black guy I work for. Shut up, just listen.
It doesn't inspire confidence when you see things like that, because you're wondering what's going on. You have to be kind of sharp. Trump, with all his shortcomings, like he knows
how to dig. Well, what we were saying was that even if Trump is losing his faculties, what difference does that make? Mm-hmm. It's like, because of all the lucid, coherent points I was making.
I didn't win with faculties.
I don't need my faculties. I just win. Yeah. He's like, Trump is like the DJ Khaled. He's just like another one.
ODB, drunken style.
Right. I mean, I did see in the Daily Beast that supposedly Trump is telling, you can never really... These reports can get really convoluted with how people choose to leak, but supposedly he's telling people, and I think he does have an understanding of the electorate in certain areas, and he's supposedly saying socialism is going to be hard to run against because people like free stuff. He's like, it's going to be hard.
Well, this is also a lesson he got from Bannon, right? Bannon was telling him,
it's a lesson he got from Bannon.
Deficit financing, let's do a jobs program.
And why is it that it's these Republican or right-wing Svengali monsters? Because Dominique Cummings, who's Boris Johnson's guy, right? There's a video of him talking at some group a year or two ago, and he's like, the thing that most people just cannot understand, and he's talking about the UK electorate, but it's global, is that he was basically like, if you went to the UK electorate, they were to the left on fiscal policy. They would love way more money for the NHS and education, and they would probably bring back the death penalty. Like, they're kind of like not so progressive on social issues. Like, that is where the electorate's at. So we have to navigate that, not by compromising on any values, but the center always has the baseline wrong of where people are at, because it's like the most projecting politics of any kind of politics. I think even really reactionary people understand that a lot of people are not with them. It's centrists. It's like affluent centrists who always think like everybody just wants to listen to NPR.
Belt tightening and live within your means. No, if you give me a credit card,
give me a credit card,
I will live outside my means.
Loosen
much happier.
Exactly. Right. Expand my means. Precisely. Exactly. All right. What is this? This is this is a little Biden in action, a little Biden freestyle.
First of all, what we have to do is go back and turn back all the changes.
Is he literally just standing there with his eyes closed? Is that his new thing?
That's a Frozen thing, but it works.
Okay, all right, yeah, rewind it.
Deal with providing people who get displaced opportunities to have jobs by sending them back to school, by doing continuing education, whole range of things. I would see to it immediately moving toward, we're in fact in a position now that if in fact we dealt with mitigation across the board, just what we did in the last
Please don't nominate this guy. I'm so
leading
scared.
to a standard that we provide efficiency for appliances.
What?
Now, as a freestylist, what do you think?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Man. He should drop bars on Sway.
He just doesn't stop. That's a key, right?
Yeah.
You don't stop.
Keep going,
and then
That's why he was so happy every time the moderator would say it's his time. Like everybody was trying to keep talking and let their points out. Every time they say time, it's my time. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. Thank you for saving me.
Hey, anyways, this broad says I'm racist. I'm not. Barack.
We can try with the
all right, my time's done. Okay, thank you.
Here it is with a backing track.
Okay.
Turn back all the changes that, in fact, the president has made, from cafe standards to moving in a direction that we, in fact, deal with providing people who get displaced opportunities to have jobs by sending them back to school, by doing continuing education, whole range of things. I would see to
this
it
kind of sounds like the beginning of RoboCop or something. Like it's like some type of corporate drone speaking nonsense over like
across the board,
some type of like high tempo elevator music.
The last administration and before, leading to a standard that we provide efficiency for appliances.
All right, that works.
It's a mixtape intro.
Yeah. Efficiency for appliances. All right, let's do one throwback clip, and then we're gonna go to the post game. But sometimes we do throwback clips of variety of people. A lot of Cornel West. This time we're gonna do some Christopher Hitchens. This is from the 1980s, and this actually kind of fits the theme. He's touching on the Jesse Jackson campaign and kind of making the point even then that the American electorate was nowhere near as sort of to the right as the kind of as the mainstream media narrative.
Listen, Jim, I mean, I am on the extreme left myself, and I can just tell you that Jesse Jackson isn't. More's the pity, in my view. He's just a good candidate in other respects.
Do Americans tolerate people who are on the extreme left in this country?
Yeah, I think they do. I think if you put it to someone, say, look, is so and so a communist? That's a particular word suggesting someone is a slavish supporter of the Soviet Union. Nobody's in favor of that. I think, as a matter of fact, some of the things that people who are said to be on the extreme left happen to believe are widely respected. Let me give an example from the gentleman's question about the Third World. The other night at his press conference, the President of the United States said that the problem in South Africa was not one of racism, it's a problem of tribalism, and that in effect gave the government there a leg up, a clean bill. Now, most of the American public is perfectly capable of knowing and for itself and deciding that's untrue, and is worried that the United States is on the wrong side in the battle for South Africa, which is going to be, already is in fact, a titanic battle, the last battle against colonialism in Africa, a battle on the scale of the battle for the independence of India. At the moment, Reagan has committed the US on the wrong side of that. Most Americans think it should be the other way around, and they're right. That's not an extreme left point of view, though it is a point of view held by the extreme left.
Well, as most Americans...
That's positive. Yeah, we don't, please, we cannot watch this ghoul. Let's just, it's just like 1980s conservatism. Jesus Christ. But I think that really stands as a general framework, that a lot of, and Sanders is kind of like the ultimate vindication of that right now, that every time he puts something new on the table, and someone like Chris Cillizza, who will play in the postgame, is now reduced, and look, granted, Chris Cillizza is like the dumbest guy in the game, but he will say just like, polls say that Green New Deal and single payer is unpopular. And it's like, I guess now we're just in the phase where you just have to just say that, contrary to everything.
Well, it's also a shame because what have we been doing on the left in our long period of decline? Because a lot of us lost confidence because we started to think that the voters were against us. We started to think that we couldn't talk about core issues like people's health care, how much cash is in your pocket, can you get your kid in a good public school, like things that matter to every single human being in this country who earns less than $110 10 grand a year. Like, think about the stuff constantly. And it's just odd that we had this detour, you know, for 10 years where we just stopped talking about the only issues that people wanted us to talk about.
Absolutely. What was your kind of journey politically?
Well,
I mean, I know you
I was always on the left, you know what I'm saying? But I did drink the neo-lib juice for a while, thinking like capitalism is gonna save the whole world, and you know the economy is growing and everything like that. And you know, I went to school. I went to Maryland U, and when I came out, I realized that it wasn't that at all. I mean, at least from my personal perspective, right. It wasn't working out for me. And I started looking at everything that was going on, and I just started waking up to the realization that they were just feeding us a narrative and propagandizing, you know, capitalistic values, and we didn't notice. You don't know while you're living that the rich people are getting richer, like while you're just years are going by until somebody tells you like this is what's going on. Then you're waking up, you're like, oh damn, like the wages are not going up, the billionaires, you know, are controlling everything, and it's getting vacuumed up. Yes. And it's not coming back down. We're still waiting for the trickle. It never came. Mm-hmm. That was a lie. And so then after it started, I started going back to, you know, my socialist visions, where the basics of what you said. Everybody, you want to be able to have health care. You want to be able to make a decent living. You don't want to have to work 80 hours just to be able to live. Things like that would normalize during, I feel like, the 90s, the bling bling era, the neo-lib era.
Absolutely.
I think I just realized it wasn't benefiting people. I'm seeing people not even keeping up with what their parents were doing. So there's something wrong there. It's just like they're not dumber than their parents. They're not working as hard as their parents. I know they're smart. They're doing what they're doing, but they're not getting it. It's because the system is flawed. It's not working for them. So therefore, I feel like that system must be dismantled. We must be courageous enough to think about something new. But we already know what we need. It's just about, we know who's blocking this. We have to be aware of who's blocking that from happening.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I think that is the biggest advancement now. Is I do think increasingly people know, and then it's just a question of what blocks. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably one of the reasons that we do have such an allergy to the Andrew Yang thing, is I think that Andrew Yang is kind of like the latest iteration of let's get out of the actual basic conflictual nature of politics and economics and back to some type of like techno escape, which is even more bleak, because in the 90s we could have been like, yeah, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, money, and now it's just sort of like, you guys should just shut up and take some money for your joysticks, which is kind of depressing. We're gonna or whatever. Wait, is that an out of date video game reference?
My guy's a game
Forgive
since
me.
the Atari days.
I never gamed.
Yeah.
I was not allowed to.
Say like video card or something.
Okay, video card. Okay, you know, can you give me a? That's also old, Matt.
Yeah. No, it's
boom.
Not.
Can you give me a "Forgive me, Father, I've sinned" Joe Biden drop? Because that's exactly how I feel about getting that reference out of date. I don't care. And
we
it does not matter
nowadays, man.
Yeah, check this out.
Bless me, Father, if I have sinned.
I love that. That's the most appealing part of Joe Biden. This is just like
the asshole.
I don't care. I'm an ass. Yeah, let's just do this. Oh, my eye's bleeding. I'm sorry. All right, folks, we're gonna go to the post game. Get your tickets to see us in Philly. We have a ton of stuff to get to on the post game. We have a debunk with Ben Burgess. We have a bad segment. We were talking about South Africa, Zimbabwe, and a new Lula interview and new Lula revelations. Your Discord questions, maybe some calls if we have time. Next week, we'll definitely take calls because I know we've been really jammed up. You're going to find all the links, obviously, to how you can find all of our guest works. But Napoleon, if you have something, you want something you want to top line for people to look up?
NapoleonDaLegend.com. Team NDL on Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, you can find my music all on those platforms.
And all of the links will be there.
Yes.
We appreciate you. We'll see you in the post game. Bhaskar Sunkara, Force of Jacobin Magazine, Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, a great, amazing guest. Read all of her work. She's very strategic. Patreon.com/TMBS. This Sunday, Illicit History of Robert Mugabe with Bill Fletcher Jr. And we'll see you in the postgame.